Hey, welcome back to Nearbound at Work. Every Wednesday, noon Eastern. Here we are diving in. Sometimes we get really, really tactical and in the weeds. Sometimes we're a little higher level. And today, I'm super excited. Like, I love all of these sessions and I always learn a ton. But there is something really nice about someone that you just have a lot of rapport with. And I know that Jared's going to bring it. He and I podcast together regularly. So, Jared, we're going to walk through. So we just released recently the Nearbound Sales Blueprint, which you can find for free at nearbound.com. And in there, we walk through kind of the three key plays of Nearbound Sales, tapping into your network of partners for intel, intros, and influence. And we're going to kind of the next three sessions here, the next 3 Wednesdays at noon, walk through those one at a time and get into some examples and stuff. And so, Jared, before I kick it over to you, what I love about this is that this is not just, hey, here's this idea we put together. Here are these plays that we created and these templates that we think are useful. This is stuff that like I see you use literally today, right? We're eating our own dog food, as we say in America, or as they say in France, drinking our own champagne, which is way classier. Uh, but I saw just today, you literally walk through. I think you used all 3 of the I's over the course of maybe a month on a sales play, trying to influence a deal and tapping into people in our network, people that buyer trusts. So like this is stuff that you have used, and you've kind of used some of this instinctively throughout your career and just sort of like found your way to it, hacked your way to it. But now as we've seen the economy shift, we've seen this partnerships moment and kind of defined this is what's happening, the move from the how economy to the who economy. Buyers are asking, who can I trust? And like realizing where these plays fit and what they're nested into more broadly. It's been really exciting to see this come together with like what we're learning from others out there in the real world who are making these things work and what we've learned ourselves. So with all that set up, we're going to get in today to how do you effectively run an intel play? How do you tap into your network of partners for intel to help you close more deals?
Yeah. So the way that I would kind of kick this off, Isaac, is if I'm approaching an account executive or a CRO or a VP sales or a sales manager, it's typically the same thing. It's what's the first rule of sales? First rule of sales is nobody cares about your product. Okay. So the second rule of sales in B2B is target accounts, sell to people. Which accounts, which people? That's a very fundamental question. So as a sales rep, how many accounts do you own? 100, 300, 500, 50, 20, 10. Okay, great. So inside of those accounts, how are you booking meetings with them? How are you talking to them? So there's going to be some component that's inbound. And then typically, and especially today, there's a infuriating executive level meeting happening across every single B2B SaaS company, which includes what? Reps need to do their own prospecting. Reps need to book their own meetings. That is like so gospel right now. It's like written in the pages of like every single startup plan. It's something that everyone is being forced to do, right? It's not that everyone believes that AE should do prospecting inherently. They just don't have a next best alternative.
So like the SDR function is getting stripped, basically?
No, it's not getting stripped. It's that on top of the SDR function that we need more quote unquote strategic, personalized one-to-one communication.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right. From the account executives. Right. So for example, you have lots of companies right now that are going like, well, I play air cover with the executive outreach. I reach out to VP and above or C-suite and above. Right. And then my SDR is, working these downstream contacts, trying to build ground up. So like there's plays that kind of go both directions. But here's my point. If account executives are being asked today to do this, go to a website, go to a LinkedIn, do some quote unquote research, right? And deliver a personalized outbound message. What is the context in that message, right? There should be some, I saw Jen Ellen Newth from Lavender talk about this in one of her viral LinkedIn posts. Like, what is the thing that is going to separate why you're reaching out, like the hypothesis, right? The value hypothesis. Because if it's just qualification using publicly available information and question and answer, so like, hey, let me qualify you on this call, So you somehow manage to use generically available information. You somehow manage to have a phone call. What are you talking about on that call? Okay, general qualification. What does that reduce every conversation to? Price. Why? It's the questions that you ask of the customer and what they want. So you have to have a value hypothesis. And that value hypothesis is like why you're the right fit. Now, here's the thing. Great sales is about what? Getting the answers to the test, right? Like in that conversation, good discovery would be what? Where you come away with like, here's why we're the right fit for them. I actually know that now, right? Bad qualification would be like, I'm no closer to it, but man, they sure do fit my pipeline criteria, right? Like there's no reason for them to buy. There needs to be a reason for them to buy. So here's my point. What company, what person posts their internal challenges and key business initiatives that they're trying to solve publicly? Does anybody do that? Isaac, do we talk about that publicly? Do we go on the podcast and be like, hey, here's what's really screwed up at Partner Hacker. Here's what's really screwed up at Reveal. And let me post about it publicly on LinkedIn. In fact, let me go write a blog article about it on my website. You're just not going to find what we call the answers to the test publicly. But guess who has them? People that already work with them.
Yep.
Right. So that's setting up the intel play. Why is the intel play important? It's shortcutting the answers to the test. So that way you can drive a better value hypothesis and drive a much more meaningful conversation when that happens. So we can unpack that a little bit more, but I'd say from a framework standpoint, that's why the intel play is so important. It's like, do you want the answers to the test? Don't play sales on hard mode, right? Try to book a meeting without business initiative or context or pain. Trying to book a meeting with a net new contact, completely cold using, if someone reaches out to me again, one more time, it's like, hey, Wake's doing great in, the ACC this year. Go Deeks. I'm like, that is some JV level junior varsity bullshit. It just doesn't play out anymore. Like,
well, that's what I was going
to
say. Like, I think salespeople understand that intel is important and like, oh, okay, I got to have better intel and I got to sort of tailor my stuff. But there's still this desire. The default is to go to a quantity play and to do it. So like, can I scrape information and generate a bunch of emails like you mentioned? I get stuff like this. I used to live in South Carolina, so I'll get emails being like, hey, fellow Clemson grad. I'm like, I never went to Clemson. I have no idea where that came from. But like the ROI, this is really hard for people to get at first because it just seems like scary to, let's say, reduce the sheer volume you could do using crappy intel to do a smaller amount with high quality intel, but the ROI is so huge. I told job seekers this. We had all this data that like the average job seeker, it's 150 resumes to get an interview. And when they would do research for like an hour and send like a tailored video pitch to that hiring manager, 1 in 3 got an interview. Think about the difference. So they're like, yeah, but I don't want to spend an hour. I just want to click apply 100 times. I can spam it. I can do volume. And I'm like, but it doesn't matter. How long does it take you to do 150 of those versus spending 3 hours making 3 video pitches that will get you an interview? It's actually the ROI is there, but it just feels different because you don't feel that same. So that's where like getting on that call, sending that message to someone who is not the prospect and just asking them for some intel that's actually valuable, translating that into something that's actually tailored to them. Like it feels like a roundabout way to get there, but when you stack it up in the end, the ROI is much higher. It's a much better use of your time. It's hard to get through, I think, sometimes to people.
Well, I think B2B in general, that's been the response and the rise over the past handful of years to, what companies would call an ABM strategy, right? So there is a subset of accounts that are, marketing is committed to marketing to, and that sales is committing to a different level of SLA and touch points. And that SLA include things, Isaac, like, Y, like X number of touches across Y number of contacts over Z period of time. Right. So like that SLA on the target account list between marketing and sales is like they're both committing to those things. So like an SDR might have an SLA, an AE might have an SLA, but they are required, let's say in that SLA, to do some level of like that personalized outreach. Right. So the volume game still exists, but a lot of companies have target accounts for that very reason. It's to force the function of like, look, you only have a patch of 50, right? And then there's 5 contacts in those 50. So 250 contacts and you have 1 quarter. you could spray through an email to all 250 of those contacts in 30 minutes. Right. So like, but that's not what people are doing. They are trying to do personalized outbound, interesting emails. Like look at the rise of Lavender. I mentioned Jen Allen Newth earlier. Just a big fan of what they're doing because their email and their messaging and their scoring is really great. I do like their product, and I do like that for like, kind of judging your outbound emails. They work even better when the content and context in there has a business initiative or a pain or a compelling reason to talk now. Like, what is the compelling event? Every single conversation requires a compelling event. Every single deal requires a compelling event. Getting a compelling event out of a website or a LinkedIn is fake at best.
Yeah.
Getting it out of a conversation with an internal stakeholder, right? Like that's great. Can you do it with someone that you already have some trust with? Let's say a partner or an influencer that you have an established relationship. You can actually trust that information about that account more than you could even at, let's say your cold outbound email did hit and you did get the meeting. How likely are they to share with you the real deal on that first call? Yep. I don't tell you my problems and I don't know you. Like, come on, show me you know me.
Well, and this is why we started with Intel, why this is the first play too. I love that it's the easiest play to run because it's the easiest ask of your partners. You're not asking them to put their reputation on the line and make an intro for you. You're not asking them to go and tell this person, oh, you should talk to Jared. There's no, it's really, they're just saying, here you go, do with it what you want. I've gotten this over the years with people who have come to me about they're trying to raise money from VCs that had funded my previous company. And I'll tell them, sometimes I'll ask for an intro. And I'm like, I don't know you well enough to give you an intro, but I'll give you some intel. That's easy for me to do. I'll tell you everything I know about the firm. What are they interested in? What will they care about in your deck? I have no problem giving you that because there's nothing for me to risk. You're just going to go make a better pitch. They'll fund you or they won't. I'll be like, don't name drop me. If I get in a conversation and I really like them, I might say, feel free to say that we talked, right? But like,
or typically, if they're smart, they might write a template for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like the intel play, if you're nervous and you don't know, like, I don't know if we have good enough relationships with partners to be involving them. And like, you think of like co-selling, it sounds really complex, really messy. You got like incentive. What do we do?
I mean, even Alan, I actually want to comment real, even Alan has, if you look at his content, so like Alan Adler, I'm definitely calling you out here. He started to layer in, Isaac, partner assist under the co-sell banner because he recognized, I'm like, Alan, look, co-selling is a very like two budgets. CROs don't really want to commit like, hey, let's sell two things at the same time right now. That's not working. So yeah, that partner assist, that nearbound sales play, it's actually very easy to start thinking about it that way.
It's literally just going and asking people who have more info than you do to give you some of that intel to help you with this. And so how to do that. So like in an ad hoc way, we can come up with these examples where it's like, oh, I know this person and I know that they sold into this account. I'll go ask them. How do you do this in a way that's scalable, that you can actually train sales teams? You've got these partner teams over here with all these relationships. You got these sales teams over here with all these accounts they're targeting. How do you bring those together in a way that's like actually efficient, where they don't need to, like, you don't need to know everything that the partner person knows about every partner in order to actually bring these together? Like, what does that look like in practice when you're running these plays from someone who doesn't have the knowledge, accessing the knowledge from the person who does, and then going and getting that intel?
So here's the vectors to look at whenever you're looking at, let's say, partner like overlap with a target account on an AE basis and on a partner basis. What you're going to be looking for is the relevancy of signal, right? And let's go back to the conversation with Vinay yesterday. So we had a phenomenal conversation with the CEO of Trust Radius yesterday, talking about 4.7 star syndrome, and it was phenomenal because he actually shared some data of what people care most about from review sites. And what he said, Isaac, was that things like awards, right, are 23 times less valuable than what? The relevancy or relatability to me. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at that partner overlap. Let's say there's 7 partners that have that account listed as a customer. What's that relevancy or relatability, to us or to this deal? So for example, we could look at time as one of those things. So recency. So let's say one of your partners closed a deal in the last quarter, right? Knowing what we know about the macroeconomic environment, I'm assuming, provided it's in a tangential or similar department, right? It couldn't be HR versus sales. That's probably going to be a stretch, but let's call it sales versus ops or sales versus sales, right? Into the same department or a supporting department. I have to imagine that there was a business case, a business initiative based on some challenge. And that's the reason why they bought, right? So that recency and relevancy is actually really high. So someone that's had them listed as a customer for 2 years versus someone that's had them listed as a customer for 2 or 3 months. These are two opposite scenarios. Why? The person that's listed them as a customer or partner for 3 months, right? Who am I reaching out to? I'm reaching out to the account executive, right? And what I'm getting from an Intel perspective is going to be insight on the key business initiatives that resulted in them creating a purchase decision. And then can also seek intel on, let's say, the procurement process or like the key, let's say economic buyers or stakeholders or, gotchas, right? Versus that person or partner that's been a customer for 2 years, you're looking at a CSM at that point. And is that CSM even really a CSM? Like, is this actually like an account manager that knows that account well? Or is it hey, this is the 4th CSM that's been assigned to that account because we're trying to, like that actually happens in SaaS a lot, right? It's like that CSM's never even talked to that customer. So that's a different, context and situation. And you have to be able to triangulate. And so that's the first vector. The second vector I would say is like the role more specifically, right? So looking at things on a per partner basis of those 7 partners that list that as a customer, if recency and relevancy of when they signed a deal, right, is not there, you can also look at, let's say, the role overlap, right? So for example, I mean, you can come up with endless permutations of this, but let's just take this one, sales and ops. Let's say you sell into the sales department. One of the blockers has been the ops team does not have the bandwidth to prioritize any project like this right now. Okay, one of your partners has listed the COO, the VP of operations, the VP of revenue operations, the senior director of operations, and has really sells into that ops department. I just have to imagine that you're being blocked from the ops department. Your partner is all up in the ops department, has all of the contacts. Might there be some intel there? Like, yeah, of course there is. Duh. Like, that's the best place to get it. And they're absolutely willing to share some of that insight, a CSM and SE and an account manager about the ops department, what's important to them, how shit gets done there, and how you be a good partner in pursuit of a sale or be told to go pound sand. Like, hey, look, this team is a nightmare. Their hair's on fire. They ain't doing anything for the next 6 months. The layoffs happened. Okay, good. But like, why would I ever pursue that account? Like that account's dead, DOA, dead on arrival.
So I wanted to bring this up because there's a couple points in here when you are going through the, let me see here. There we go. The intro play. Taking it a second here. It's like we're almost there. 11, I think. 12. No. Okay, here we go. Running the sales play. So the intel, not the intro, the intel play. So I think something really important that you mentioned here is like, it's not just like, okay, cool. Here's a partner. They're attached to this account. Maybe there's 10 partners that have, that account as a customer. I'll just go send them all an email that says, hey, would you give me some info on this customer? Like, that's probably not going to get you very far. So first identifying the right person, right? And you gave some examples of the timeliness, who you're going to be talking to. But then, and I don't know if you can see this very well, it's kind of zoomed out a little bit far, but you mentioned like how you do the ask, and you've got a great email template right in this blueprint, but to offer to help, I think that's really important in who you choose too. Like when you mentioned a CSM, there's probably not much you can offer them reciprocally. If you're like, hey, give me some intel on this account, and then I'll help you. What? Like they're managing other.
Let's talk about this. Actually, this is a very good point.
Okay.
The intel play is actually a really good forcing function for treating yourself like as part of the play. What do I mean by that? Don't be 100% reliant on your partner to gather the intel. You have intel. For example, it does not take that long to, for instance, and this is a great tip for partner managers. Let's say you see that it's a CSM X, right? Okay, Do you have access or the ability to go filter the accounts that are listed as customers, right, for that CSM? What's their patch like, right? And if you look at that overlap patch with that CSM, then you could specifically call out, 2 accounts. Hey, it looks like we have some overlap here and here where, I'm working an upsell, or, they brought up your application or product. The point is if you just looked at that, went and got a little bit of intel, and you were willing to dangle that carrot as a reason for meeting, how much more likely do you think that CSM is to think of you as a strategic person by which to do business with? Right? Like you need to be able to show the whiffum, what's in it for me. And there's a reason why each of my emails in these templates, like that's the PS, which is also one of the highest converting lines, is an offer to help. Right?
Yep. Yep.
Like don't ask for a call.
And in a specific way. This
Right.
is where I love that you made the intel goes two ways. Like if you don't bring any intel to the table, you're probably not going to get very far asking for intel. So making an offer, and we talked about this a lot, just in general. Hey, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. Not very helpful. It puts all the burden on that person. I don't know how you might be able to help me. But if you come and say, hey, I noticed you have an open opportunity with this account. I know them. I closed them last quarter. I'd be happy to offer any info to you if you want some. Then, and you're doing the work for them. You're showing them, you're paying attention. You looked, you saw, that they had overlap here, that this is an open opportunity for them. Like naming a specific account in a specific way you're willing to be helpful. That's what's going to make them be like, oh, wow, that's incredibly generous. Yeah.
Well, we're talking about 3 accounts now on a 15-minute call. That's worth my time.
Yes. Yep.
Not just one, right? We're talking about 3. Yeah. So bring that to the table. Like these plays, how long does it take to do personalized outbound research to drive one of those emails? It should take 5 to 10 minutes, right? To actually do that the right way. It takes the exact same amount of time or less to do exactly what I just said right here. Right? Yep. Like, so you can replace, and what is the conversion rate on those outbound plays? So like, it does require some coordination too, right? You don't want to go put all of this effort into writing this thing absent knowing that relationship here is good enough. So another trick that I could also talk about for the intel play is permission to run an intel play, right? Like one of the best sales tactics I could ever give to anyone is before you're going for an ask permission for the ask. It just almost guarantees that next step. So for example, like, you can do that on a respect contract at the beginning of a call. Like, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question and it's a really honest one, right? Then you do the respect contract ask. Like, if at any point during this conversation you realize it's not a fit, will you please let me know? Yep. Yes, of course, right? So you can do that same thing here and go, hey, I'm selling into this account and I was looking for some intel. Do you mind if I go, do this, do some of my research and share some overlap, blah, blah, blah. And if I send you over a request, will you take a look at it? Like, it sounds so counterintuitive, but like even aligning with, let's say, your Nearbound account list and running those plays first, like, hey, I'm going to get permission. These are all new people, right? Yep. If you were to give them an example of like, hey, here's a play I'm trying to run with this account. If I put together the right intel and the right ask, would you be willing to fill me in on some of these details, or are you not aware? Right. So that permission can also work tremendously on any of these plays, but also for intel as you're establishing new relationships. And then your likelihood that they convert on the next one is much higher. And then you don't have to go through all the research, the 5-10 minutes to put that together.
So Kabir has a question. I just noticed. Sorry, Kabir. I realized it's 10 minutes ago, but in the QA section, in an early stage of a partnership with a high overlap of ICP, how do you navigate the conversation where partners want to know what's in it for them?
Well, I mean, like all good answers, it depends what you're talking about. Knowing what I know about this, let's assume that it's, what's the reason for partnering in the first place? Is it an integration? Is it a service partnership? Is it a co-marketing partnership? Like, go back to the reason for partnering. Why did they ever agree to partner in the first place? Or why are they thinking about, partnering in the first place? You need to have your partner value hypothesis the same way that, you have a customer value hypothesis. It's that by working together in this way, we're going to share, intel or influence. I actually think Box did a really phenomenal example of this. If you looked at their Box partner kickoff event, Isaac, I know We were sharing some screenshots back and forth because they had Nearbound language throughout like this entire kickoff event. It was really cool. But they were communicating to their partner ecosystem, hey, we are coming to you asking for intel, influence, and intros when that makes the most sense. They actually manage the expectation that that's how they're going to be coming to their ecosystem. And guess what they said? We want to do the same for you. Right? So like they put some guardrails on like, this is how we're going to help each other. So like, if you do this right, I mean, I always go back to examples that like worked. Is that, you know, the Drift and 6 Sense example was a phenomenal one because this was happening 6 to 7 times a day. You know, which is pretty remarkable that was happening just between those two companies that only had a couple hundred employees apiece. So what's in it for them is like, if you have a high enough ICP overlap, is there a joint value proposition? So like the more of these circles you can concentric circles you can make overlap, the better you're going to have in these results. So with Drifted and 6 Sense, it was product, right? So there was an integration, and the integration made both products and both users better. We had proof of that. We had partners that could service that as well. So we not only had the tech partners validating this, we had agencies like ROI DNA and Shift Paradigm and LeadMD that were like, yes, Drift plus 6 Sense is the cat's meow. So we had multiple people that could influence from that perspective. We did co-marketing together. So we were doing the big events, right? So our brands were next to each other. And then we were doing the, you know, Nearbound sales plays together and success plays. We were connecting our success teams to like every time we'd sign a new customer to make sure that the integration was connected. So what's in it for them? It was, you know, that's why it was a multi-million-dollar alliance, is that there was more concentric overlap across each bucket, you know, marketing, sales, success.
What's interesting about this Intel play, and just sort of zooming out and recognizing there are people that have answers to the tests on this account. I need to tap into those. It can expand beyond just kind of the formal plays that you can run with partners where you can see that overlap easily. You can combine this with something like social selling, right? Where you're on LinkedIn and you notice somebody's commenting about something, and then you see that as a cue and you engage in them. And most people use this just to sell directly, right? Oh, hey, I noticed Isaac, you were talking about, right? I noticed you were talking about using video, blah, blah, blah. Have you considered this video platform? And they're trying to sell you their video platform, but using this to get intel. So if you see someone and you have, some reason to believe, and you can usually get this information in a lot of ways, even if you don't, let's say, even if the information doesn't exist in Reveal for you, that they have sold into an account that you want to sell into. You can engage in them on social in that way. And it's a very easy, like, hey, I noticed your post about, if it's a salesperson and they're posting about whatever, some tactics they've used to close deals, hey, like you can fish for one. You could say like, hey, what are like the top 5 accounts that you closed using these tactics? And maybe one of them is an account you're targeting. Or if you have one in mind, you could be like, hey, I saw your post. Thought that was really interesting. I'm curious. Did those plays work when you were trying to close this account? Right. And you're like going and trying to, even if you don't have a relationship, you kind of use those same social selling tactics, but to get intel from them, not to sell them something, to get intel from someone else. I've seen you run plays like that, Jared, where it's like another step removed and it feels indirect, but that is exactly how you can get what you need. You sort of like understand that you have to, your buyers are surrounded with influence, and you have to surround those influencers from many different angles to like with what, I can't think of a good analogy, ways to like probe them for intel. So anyway, I've seen that play kind of used by you in like sort of a ad hoc way, but I think that's just realizing that it goes beyond just like formal partnerships.
Yeah. And formal email too. Like, this topic has gotten so big that we're actually carving it out in a chapter in Nearbound the book now, right? Nearbound social, right? Nearbound social is kind of a thing, and it does sit across marketing, sales, and success. It's actually very easy to layer partners and influencers and key contacts and advisors into your social strategy. How do you do it? Well, you make it very easy to comment the stuff that you want. So for example, like, you go and make a post about something that you're trying to drive reg for something, have a partner be the one that posts the link, right? Like, that's a smart thing to do. You have a much more personal, like, thought leadership piece, get one of your influencers to write something up and tag one of their target accounts. right? Like I'll do that all the time. I'm like, this post is actually about influencing these 5 accounts or this new segment or this territory. And then I'll get 4 or 5 people that I know have relationships, and I'll write comments for them and tell them to tag specific people. Be like, hey, check this out.
Yep.
I mean, that's like some ninja stuff.
And it's
That's
such a
some next level
different.
in the maturity curve. That's like a next level play, but like, does it work? Hell yeah, it works. That's why. What do you think I keep doing it?
Yeah, 100%. And it's just kind of shifting that mindset from like, something like social being seen as, I got to maximize my views, impressions, likes, engagements. Like, yeah, that's all great. That increases your luck surface area, but it's about who more than anything. So like, who needs to see this? Who will they take it the most seriously from if they see a comment from, right? And then like vice versa, when you're going out there and looking, oh, I noticed this person commented on this. That's a little piece of intel right there. I'm going to take that intel and I'm going to use that in my intel play. And I'm going to go to someone else and say, hey, thought you might like to know this dude just commented about this thing on this other post. And it's right up the alley of what you guys are trying to sell. That might be a good thing. There's like a give. And then, by the way, I'd love to know this about that, right? Like just kind of like, it's like tuning in. Like once you flip that switch and you realize like, I'm not just out there to sell, I'm out there to get answers from people that can help me sell. You start to see it everywhere. Okay, Jared, I would love to talk a little bit about how the Intel play is such a great kind of foray into the next 2 plays that we're going to get into in a little more in depth in the next 2 sessions. So often the way this goes, if you're doing it right, is like you start seeking intel. And as we mentioned, it's a pretty light ask. It's not super, super high lift for the people you're asking, but that often can like parlay because it's easy. They'll come back and give you some intel and you don't want to just be like, okay, great. Thanks. Now I'll take this and run. That's often an opportunity to go a level deeper and to kind of parlay that into an intro or influence. So I'd love to hear just like some tactics or thoughts on how to not just take the intel itself, but to leverage the intel into something more.
So to take it to that next level, I'm also taking notes here while we're doing this. So this is like totally like learning out loud, Isaac. Like literally, I'm like, okay, that was actually a really good point. Let me write that down right here. So going to the next step of like, I don't know if I should bring up the example from today.
I mean,
is that a good one to bring up?
You can just like anonymize it.
Yeah, of course. Here's what's really interesting where these types of things can go is that whenever you're going to, let's say, close an account, right? And I like being explicit in the closing process. And I try to tell people to like bring the contract up and make the ask once you think you have the boxes checked. Don't leave it to an amorphous date. Like go for a hard close. Why? Because people will tell you why they won't. Right? And then you can sell to those things. I can't sell to objections that I don't know exist. So on the Intel play, like here's where Intel can like come in and out of a cycle as well. Right? Like Intel is not like, oh, I got Intel from a partner at some random point. I ran an influence play. So we'll kind of go in a roundabout way here, right? I ran an influence play. There was a VP that was ghosting one of my reps. And this just happened like in the last month. So like, am I actually doing this stuff in this blueprint? Yes. Like I am doing it. That's why I'm writing about it. It's not ivory tower intellectual BS. Like these are battle tested plays. I ran this influence play where I messaged a partner that I knew had a relationship from overlap data. And I said, hey, we've had 3 meetings with this person. They've ghosted us for the past 3 weeks and haven't responded to a single email. I was hoping that you could shoot this note that I wrote for you below to that contact. Right. And that note was about, basically saying, hey, I knew you were talking to such and such. I know that you've ghosted them. That must be for a reason. Right. But I'd encourage you to take this next meeting and, actually meet with Jared. Right. Sent that out. Nothing happens. Person ignores him. I follow back up on that influence play and I say, hey, did anything come out of this? I never saw anything back come through. And the person responds and says, hey, I actually have my one-on-one with this partner tomorrow. Brings it up in the conversation. And what do I wake up to this morning? I wake up to an Intel email that came back, right? That Intel email that came back to me was like, hey, Jared, just FYI, this person was really pissed off about how aggressive your sales rep was, right? Which, hey, fair call out, right? Like intel is about getting the answers, the truth. And here's their blockers. Boom, boom, boom. That's like the best intel in the world. I was getting nothing, ghosted, zero. And now I have the actual objections. One, two, three, four. And he said, he's willing to take a meeting with you. Boom. And then sends an intro email to that contact who had talked to my rep, but it would never respond to me. And now we booked that meeting. So that's how and when I go into that meeting, what do I have? I have the intel on the things that are standing in that contact's way from advancing the conversation. Do you think that's going to be a better sales call than if he had randomly, let's say, accepted a meeting from my rep and clicked, book a meeting, right? Which of those two meetings is going to go better?
Yep.
Which of those two? It's pretty obvious that the one that I'm walking into with the intel that I have is going to go far better, not to mention the fact that it got booked in the first place.
Yep.
It's pretty like those things for me. That's why I'm sitting on this pedestal and yelling it from the rooftops and ranting about this is like, that is so objectively better. It's shockingly obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just a great example of how these plays kind of stack on each other, and just to recognize like what you're getting and at each stage, and not to push for the wrong thing. So like, for example, you do this influence play. Can you send this message to influence this person? The influence play doesn't seem to result in anything. You check in on it, and what you get back is, if you read it purely as like, how did my influence play work? You would say, well, it didn't work. He came back and said, the guy has all these objections. But if you read it as, no, it turned into an intel play. I got all this intel. I didn't ask for intel, but I got all this intel. Great. Now I can use that intel for the next thing. And like, just looking at it, to your point, is like, this is just truth, and truth is always valuable when you're trying to close a deal, and not looking at it like my influence play failed. The guy, like, no, I got something that's incredibly valuable for that next step, and just being able to be kind of nimble and like adjust, and then be like, okay, now let's ask for an intro, now let's parlay this. Okay. It doesn't look like I'm getting this. How about an intel? Like, just recognizing the adaptability necessary.
I want to comment on that too, because what you just said, Isaac, is backed by probably one of the best sales books of all time, which is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And in there, he details like what I think is a pretty healthy understanding of what it means for negotiation, right? So like, what is negotiation? Negotiation is the art and science of making the other party solve for your problems while simultaneously solving for their problems. How do I solve for problems that they have with me that I'm unaware of? Like during the course of a negotiation, these unknowns become so important that Voss refers to them as black swan events. This is information that is essential to both parties that neither party is aware of until it is surfaced by, obviously the better, let's say, winning negotiating party, meaning like they're the ones that are going to make a deal or a negotiation happen. Is there's typically some black swan event, and it's like, look, what did we just uncover? This is moving the deal forward. We uncovered the problems and the blockers that are standing in the way of it. So to win this negotiation, I am responsible for making the other party solve my problem, but I'm also responsible for solving their problem. That's sales. That's negotiation. Intel will always get you closer to it. And there's a reason why I chose that word. Like intel and Voss, right? This is like intelligence gathering. Right? How do you get intelligence in the field? Chris Voss is the FBI hostage negotiator. And we're not just talking bank standstill, 6 hours, right? Right now, we're talking hostages held in foreign countries for months and years. So how do you get intel to negotiate with the terrorists? You go to the people who know them. Like, you get intel. Like, how does the CIA do it? How do FBI hostage negotiators do it? They go around the people, because obviously the people holding them hostage are not willing to negotiate on all the terms all the time, just the way that your customer is. So you find out, actually, they're really pissed about our presence in this region. They're really pissed about this other thing, and that's why they won't talk to us. Well, shit, let's go remove those barriers. Like, why are we in that region? We can offer that as a carrot, but they weren't telling us that. So, I mean, this is
by the way, if you've ever had somebody come to you trying to sell you something who they actually ran a good intel play ahead of time, you feel so I'm like so appreciative when that happens. I've had, for example, I've had people, email me and be like, hey, so-and-so, I was talking to so-and-so and they told me that you absolutely hate meetings. So instead I made this 5-minute video for you because I wanted to show you this thing. Soon as I hear that, I'm like, oh, thank God. Yes, I do hate meetings. I never want to take a meeting unless I have to. And like just getting that, I'm like, fine, I will watch your video. You took, instead of be like, hey, Isaac, can we chat? It's like, that's like the most terrifying message ever to me. It's like, no, we can't just chat. I don't want to just meet.
Right.
But it's like, you appreciate it, right? You appreciate, even if the person's name isn't mentioned, if they get it right and they bring something to the table. So I want to throw out just a thought that I had here, Jared. And you might even have some stories of how this can help sort of compound these things, but something to remember with the intel play. If you have gone to somebody for intel and they have come back and given you intel, don't forget, like they're now basically saying to some degree, I'm willing to be on this journey with you. I'm willing to go on the adventure with you, and keep them involved in just in terms of updating them. Let them know what happened with the intel they gave you. Hey, heads up, I booked a meeting. Thanks so much. That was really helpful. Hey, heads up, 2 weeks later, had a great first call, blah, blah, blah. For one, they're probably going to end up giving you more intel along the way, and they may even be willing to do more in terms of influence. But two, they're going to feel like you have people ask you for intel, you give it to them, and then you don't hear what happens. It doesn't matter. You're not mad. But if they come back to you and say, hey, by the way, thanks so much for that, really helped, here's what happened, you feel great, and you're more likely to think of them in the future, and you're more likely to help them in the future. So like something as small as just let the people who gave you intel know what became of it, even if it was nothing. Hey, guess what? I sent them an email based on some of the stuff you told me, never heard anything back, sent a few follow-ups. Often they'll say, oh, really? Well, did you know that this person took over that role or whatever? They'll give you more intel. So like follow up with the person who gave you intel, give them the results, let them know what's happening, give them the play-by-play, not too much, but just kind of every once in a while, give them a status update.
Yeah. I mean, I literally just did this for someone too. So you saw me looking off to the side. I just shot someone a text doing that exact same thing. Like literally in real time, just said, hey, I just want to let you know, by the way, that customer ended up buying from us. Thanks so much. Just did that. I actually have a phenomenal story about this, Isaac.
Perfect. It's a great way to wrap it. We'll bring it home with the story and then leave people with like, a little inspiration for what they can do to get started on this right away.
Yes. I mean, so this story involves the VP of partnerships at Adobe, Amit. And he reported at that time directly to Shantanu, who's the CEO of Adobe. So we're talking the person responsible for a $250 billion, ecosystem. This is not, JV level. And by the way, VP titles at Adobe mean something. There's less than 50 globally, right?
Hey, now shots fired.
No, I mean, legitimately, you're talking, these people manage hundreds of millions of dollars with a VP title, right? Like it's very, very serious. So here's how we actually did this is I was like, man, I know this play. I know we can be their number one partner globally. And no matter what I sent to him, he wouldn't book a meeting. He'd open the email, but he wouldn't book a meeting. And you know what? I was like, I got to find out all the answers to the test and make sure this guy knows that I'm finding all the answers to the test, right? So getting all of the intel and like coming up with something. So with Justin Bartels, who was working with me on the team, and he moonlit a handful of episodes on the podcast too, on Partner Up. Justin, I was like, look, we're just going to run this play where I just called it the circle back play. And we're not going to end any email with an ask. All that we're going to do is we're just going to say, hey, Amit, just FYI, this thing happened, learned this thing, blah, blah, blah. Hope you had a great month. That's it. And we sent that email for 8 months, right? So, and he opened up all 8. And the first one he opened up once. The second one he opened up once. The third one he opened up 3 times. And then it was like by the 8th email, he'd opened that email like 20 times. Interesting, right? Because we just shared all of the intel that we were gathering to build the case for a true alliance, like executive level meeting. We're talking numbers that are dozens of millions and hundreds of millions. And he'd been brought along that journey and had never met with us once. And on the 8th one, he responded, when can we meet? Copying in my EA to schedule. I didn't ask for the meeting. right? So like that's how powerful intel actually gathering is that what did I do? Going back to what I talked about with Chris Vaughn, I found the black swan. And he saw my thought process building up to that black swan, all the intel that we'd gathered. And then when I was finally at a place where I'm like, hey, next month, I mean, how I ended that one is like, hey, next month, I might end with an ask for a meeting. Right. So I even ended with that, like, hey, next month I might ask this because I think we're here. And then he just responds, no, we need to meet now.
That is a really cool twist.
True story. True, 100% true story. Yeah, completely validated in the market. Like we could bring him in on.
I love that. I love that twist on the intel play, which is basically telegraphing to the person that you are running an intel play and just backing off on the ask to just share the intel you're gathering step by step. That's really interesting. It's funny in the nonprofit fundraising world I used to work in. That was the rule of thumb was 7 touches in between each ask. So like you were supposed to do that. Just send emails saying, hey, I thought of you, or hey, here's this thing we put together, or hey, blah, blah, blah. 7 of those for every one ask. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing it right, was kind of the basic idea. And I think that's something that can be forgotten, right? It's like, I got to get the meeting on every email. It's like, no, you've got to get the person to want to open the next email or to get them to take the next step, to get them to keep engaging. If you can get the meeting, get the meeting. I'm not at all saying that, but like, if you run into that, I just love that example of like, keep gathering. If they haven't said no, if they're not telling you to run away, if they're still opening your emails, keep gathering more and better intel and putting that together and like just demonstrating, learning out loud in front of them. Very interesting play, Jared. I love that. Okay. Bring us home with like, somebody's listening to this and they're like, all right, I want to get started. I got a bunch of deals right now this month I'm working on. What can I go do today to try to get an intel play going to help me on one of these deals? Where would you start?
I mean, sit down, 360 view. So do it on a per rep basis. Don't do it on a per partner basis. I see partner people screw this up all the time. They go and they look at where their partners can help, not where the accounts are in their cycle. So like there is a rep that is more friendly than another rep, right? So like pick your rep wisely. That is more friendly to like, you know, the smart, first and foremost, right? That is articulate, you know, is a good seller and communicator. So that way you can sit down with them and pull up their 360 account list, go look at the top 10, you know, partner accounts and their overlap and look for that signal, that relevancy, right? So did they just sign up as a customer of one of those partners, right? Are they selling into the same persona? And then figure out what intel is missing and what intel you have on those accounts. So like sit down and if you're the seller, go do it. Bring your partner person to the table that manages the partner side of the relationship and go do it together. Right. That's my point is to go sit down and build this Nearbound account list together and then draft first intel play on the most relevant partner together. Right. And then if you're scared, get permission. Hey, we want to run this play against this account. This is the information we gather and share to see if you could provide anything. Do you have a relationship enough to be able to share some insight like that? Right. Get permission even from that partner. So like, boom, in 60 seconds, that's how you can get started and go do it now.
I love it. I love it. And the blueprint is there at nearbound.com as mentioned. And we're always here to help, by the way. Like if you're starting to get these plays going, you just want some help, you want some insight. Is there a better way to do this? How should I introduce this? How can I get my sales reps bought in? If you're a partner person, come hit us up. Isaac at reveal.co. I'll probably point you to Jared because he's the master more than I am. Hit us up on LinkedIn, whatever. We're always happy to help get these plays going so we can save go to market together. Jared, thanks so much, man. Next Wednesday, we will dive into, are we going to do intros or influence next? Which order do you want to do? Influence? Okay.
Yeah, we'll save the hardest for the last.
Okay. We'll dive into influence next week. See everybody then.
All right. See y'all.